Good evening and welcome to this edition of In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. No, it's not an In Focus candidate forum. We're done with those. But you have to do your work now. We have talked to the candidates that are running in contested races. Your time to go out and vote. It has already begun. You still have time to do that. In-person or early voting is taking place 301 East Main Street, Mondays 8:30 to 5, Tuesday through Friday 8:30 to 4:30. This Saturday, the 26th, and November 2nd from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Last day for that is November 4th. And then early voting is going to be kicking in on Monday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Coleman Center and at First English Lutheran Church. And there you see underneath that those dates that I mentioned before, the Coleman Center voting, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Saturday, October 26th and November 2nd. Don't forget, if you need some information, call the clerk's office. The number is there on the screen, 973-9226 for those that are listening to the audio on 1490 WKBV and 100.9 ESPN Radio, and also G1013. And one day I'll actually get that exactly the way they want me to say it. I'll write it down. Or you can also visit the clerk's office website. And then on Election Day, Tuesday, November 2nd, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., the Coleman Center, Mount Olive Baptist Church, First English Lutheran Church, First Baptist Church, and the Golay Center in Cambridge City. Again, want to remind you that if you are a Richmond resident and you are in Western Wayne County on Election Day, you can go into the Golay Center and vote. And if you are a Western Wayne County resident, if you are in Dublin or Milton where they are having elections and you find yourself in Richmond on Election Day, you can stop into one of the vote centers here and vote. Also a reminder, if you are voting a straight party ticket, I'll let that one go, you still have to go in and vote for the at-large position. So Richmond Common Council at large, there are 6 people running for 3 seats. A straight party vote does not cast a ballot for any of those folks. You do have to go in and vote for them separately. And then on November 5th, Tuesday evening, beginning at 6 p.m., we'll hang out just because there's nothing else to do. Myself, Melissa Vance, will be joined by some of the candidates that ran in uncontested races, get a chance for you to hear from them, what their plans are as they go into the year. And maybe we'll talk to the party chairs and figure out some other things to do as we wait for the election results to come in. Tuesday evening beginning at 6 p.m. here on WGTV Channel 11. I have been wanting to do this interview for a period of time, and I mentioned it to our guest previously, and we've finally been able to make it work, and I appreciate him taking the time to come in and talk to me. I'm going to use the official term, State Representative Brad Barrett. State Representative for District 56, but you prefer Brad, you don't prefer the titles that go along with that, so we'll do that this evening. But thank you very much for being here with me. I do appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. We're at election time, like you talked about.
Yeah.
But this year, I'm off. I'm off the clock. I'm not. So this seems like it's more of a informal, comfortable, less stress conversation.
Not one of those gotcha things we run in here periodically.
Exactly.
Huh?
But we've been talking about doing this for a long time, so I'm glad we've had an opportunity to get it scheduled and lined up.
We have. Brad Barrett, who is the state representative, like many people in this community, I met before he became a state representative. He was a doctor, a surgeon in the community for how long?
We moved here in 1993 from Indianapolis. I did my training there. I met my wife there. So we came in 1993 to really a first job, first home, had our kids here. And then my goal was to work 25 years, retire at the age of 55, which I was able to fulfill.
You pulled off. Why? Let me ask, because I don't know that I've ever asked that. Why Wayne County?
Well, I think it was really the group that I joined, General Surgeons Incorporated, and the hospital and the setting. I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. Between my various points of education, I went to Notre Dame undergrad, Ohio State Med School, IU for my training, met my wife who was from Southern Indiana. This just seemed to be centrally located with all those points. And the group that I joined was absolutely the draw to this community. And then having lived here for those 25 years, we really fell in love with the community and with the area. And I was looking for another outlet, another way to have an impact in the community, another way to be involved. And that's when I decided to go down this route.
Was politics always at the back of your mind, or is it something that just came to you as time went on?
It was never in the back of my mind until maybe the last 8 to 10 years of my practice. And I think, the reason is it's general surgery is an all-encompassing profession. And I felt like I needed to immerse myself in that and that alone. I mean, certainly there was a time away from that where you let down, you release tension, and get away on vacation, travel, read a book, think about other things. But it was just the last 8 or 10 years where you become a little more secure in your profession that then I found that, wow, there are things that are going on in the state and in the nation that are impacting my livelihood, and I need to get involved in that. And then that's when I started getting more involved. The occasional trip to Washington, D.C. for advocacy, the yearly trips to the State House to promote health care in the state. And so I gradually got more involved in that, and I gradually saw that, wow, this could be a venue where I would be able to maintain relevance in my community. And so I think that's how I kind of got drawn to that. I retired in the summer of 2017 and had about 8 or 9 months of a nice, slow, retired lifestyle.
Played all the golf you could play, or what? Do you play golf? Do you play tennis? What do you do?
I do. I play golf. I like to travel. I don't like sitting around. And it was through that time that I really kind of came to grips with a plan in terms of where I was going to steer things for this next chapter. And my wife was a huge impact on that decision. We talked about it a lot on how would that work out in the grand scheme of things. Commitment to family and community and profession, and then really it's just been a whirlwind since then. From the day I signed up to run, through a primary, through an election, through a first session, through a first summer. It's just been an unbelievable experience.
Talk a little bit more about the process that you took to finally decide to put your name on that ballot, because you didn't jump into the race early. You jumped in, I want to say it may have been the last day or the day before the last day when your name finally made that appearance.
It was the next to last day.
Okay.
And because there was just a lot of thought that went into it. It wasn't a haphazard decision. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. There was a lot of thought that went into making that decision, and it was hard to do because I had this existence as kind of a retired guy that was comfortable, and I was going to enter an area where I was out of my element. I mean, I was treading new ground. I definitely left my comfort zone to do this. And so, like any decision I had made the last 25 years, there was a lot of effort and thought that went into it.
Okay. When you went into it, when you decided to run, what was your expectation level? You were running in a primary against somebody who already held the seat. You didn't seem completely comfortable with the process. Is that wrong?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, you could probably sense the anxiety and the tension as I sat in here the first time. I was really leaving my comfort zone, and I was entering a world that I didn't really know that much about. I felt that I had kind of a background and a life experience and an education and to do that job and to do it well, but I was entering a black hole. I didn't know that much about it. And you can read about things and you can talk to people about things, but until you experience it firsthand, my expectation and then what I actually experienced were miles apart, honestly.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with State Representative Brad Barrett, who, and the reason I'm having this conversation is really because of what he's talking about right now. We don't always have a chance to get real, honest dialogue, and there may be some people that I've spoken to in here who don't like how I said that. But you've just said it. Politics wasn't where you were pointing. It's something that you've come to. I've watched you through the legislative forums that you've done in the past years, and even in the first one, you were incredibly honest about all that you didn't know and all that you were still trying to figure out. It's never been, yeah, I'm educated, I got this. That's never been what you've put in front of the potential voters or your constituents.
Well, you know, it's hard to admit you don't know something. You know, particularly my last profession, you know, as a surgeon, people are counting on you, and I needed to display 100% control of that situation and make people feel comfortable with that. And I was entering a world that I really didn't know that much about. I remember one of the very first times after I decided to run, I met with some of the local community leaders, and they were kind of firing policy questions at me. And well, I had my own ideas on things, but I just really didn't know a whole lot about policy. And I realize now that I've got a year of experience under my belt, and I don't know how long I can keep going to the well. How many times can I keep saying that, you know, I'm learning this? I guess as long as I'm honest. I mean, there's a ton that I have learned, and I love being exposed to new ideas and new information and then trying to master that. I love that, gaining knowledge and problem solving. And at some point, I know people are going to think negatively. I think right now there's kind of a newness to this, and it's refreshing to hear somebody say they don't know. But at what point do you lose that newness?
The rules keep changing. There may be always things, maybe, that you don't know or that you have to find out or that you have to research. First day in Indianapolis, what was that like for you? You've been elected. You're first day swearing in, what's that like for you?
I remember the first day because we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that.
Yep.
You know, on November 19th of this year will be our second organization day, and that's when we all go to the State House. We go through the swearing in, we appoint a speaker, we go through that whole process.
You get an office?
I'm sorry?
Do you get an office?
I did.
Get a staff?
Well, yeah. So it wasn't what I expected. I thought maybe I'd have a big desk and a leather chair and put my feet up and talk on the phone and have people in for meetings. And I found out I get a cubicle. I have a little, probably 6x6 cubicle that has one chair in it, and there's 20 other people, and you can hear conversation on the other side of the wall. And because I was starting out as a rookie, as a freshman, and so with time you move your way up through that system into better space and maybe an office with 6 or 8 people, and you know, eventually an office of 1 or 2 people, but starting on the low end of the totem pole. But the first day, that organization day, it still gives me the chills to think about it. It was so inspiring to be sworn in by the Indiana Supreme Court judge who's from Richmond, to go through the Pledge of Allegiance and the signing in, and to have a desk in the General Assembly with your name and picture on the screen, and to hit the green button that signs you in for the day. That was awesome. And then every day of session, the routine of a prayer, a Pledge of Allegiance, the sign-in, and then the start of the day's business. I really enjoyed that part of it.
We hear that during the session, it can be an incredibly hectic time. Things are moving. A lot of decisions, you mentioned November 19th, a lot of decisions were made before you ever walked into your first session.
You really hit the ground running. I mean, this process is underway. And I think the date last year was December 5th, when all legislation for the coming year has to be in some form filed. Now, there's a lot of change that occurs in that process, but you know, here we are in November getting sworn in, and here 2 weeks later is the final day for legislation to be filed. Things happen so fast that you really have to process information and make decisions and prepare yourself. There is so much preparation that went into every day of session for me, or for the committees. So typically the routine was we would be in session on Monday afternoons, Tuesday afternoons, and Thursday mornings. Well, every other minute of that day was spent meeting with people, running around, having people from the community come over, getting information from different interest groups in the State House. And I found that I was pretty much on the run between 7:30 in the morning and maybe sometimes 9:30 at night. Now, granted, there are dinners and events and evening activities, but in reality, my goal was to network and build credibility, to get my name out in this group of people and establish an identity. And so I didn't say no to anything. I ended up going over there on Monday mornings and then spending 3 nights in Indianapolis and coming home on Thursdays because I wanted to be visible over there. And if I was spending let's say 3 hours in a car every day back and forth in the winter, then it was not time that I felt was productive. So I was tired when that was all over, and yet I feel like I got a little bit complacent in my retirement. I mean, my career was hectic and busy, and in reality, the decisions were harder and you know, sometimes life and death decisions. And so I used this line during the campaign: this is easier than my last job. I mean, it's hectic, it's a different level of stress, but I felt like I'd been to the mountain, and that this was out of the comfort zone, stressful, but in a different setting.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with Brad Barrett, State Representative, District 56. We sometimes wonder, those of us not involved in that on a daily basis, laws get passed, and then there are unintended consequences. And we go, didn't they read the bill? Didn't they know what was in it? How does that actually work?
Well, you know, we talked about the volume and how there's all this stuff coming to you and you've got to make a decision. And yet, you know, the beauty of this system is that we meet every year. And so if there is an unintended consequence, then it can be addressed. I mean, a lot of the legislation that we do, you don't realize maybe a gap or an error or a deficiency in something until you implement it. And then and only then do you see, wow, in reality, there's some things here we can tweak. And the nature of our system is such that we go back and do that then. And you know, you hope in the meantime. There are occasionally things that are passed that maybe have such a consequence that they elect not to enforce it or soften the enforcement. And I can give you an example of this.
Okay.
So as part of the opioid crisis, it was identified that physician prescribing played a role in the amount of opioids out on the street. And so there is a system in place called the Inspect system, which is a directory or a registry of every patient in the system that gets a narcotic prescription. And so the rule or the law that came into effect the year before I was in the State House was that physicians had to sign up for this, and they had to check it before every prescription for a narcotic was written to make sure that you're not writing a prescription for somebody who's shopping doctors and maybe getting 20 prescriptions from 4 different doctors. You access this Inspect system, you could see that they have 20 prescriptions that you weren't aware of, and then it could impact how you ultimately make a decision. So when they enacted that law, it was inserted into Indiana code, into an area of code where it was a misdemeanor for physicians to not sign up and to not check that with every patient. And we felt like that was an unintended consequence. The idea was to have discipline through the the licensing board, through our own board of surgery, through our own medical board, to do the discipline through that and not through the court system. And so one of the first things we addressed in this session was to insert that into the part of the code where it was initially intended to be. And yet you think, gosh, well, how could that happen? The volume of stuff, nobody realized the significance of that until it actually was enacted, and then there was the observation that, wow, this was an unintended consequence.
How have you found the process of making decisions about what bills you will support, what bills you won't support, what bills you will vote for, what bills you will vote against? There's a certain amount of pressure, got to be obvious, on both Democrats and Republicans that are there to sometimes toe the party line, as it were. You're an individual, though, and your constituents are telling you some things. And they've told you things at legislative forums. I do like this, I don't like that. How's that decision-making process for you in, this is something I believe in, but I've heard from a lot of constituents it's not right? How do you balance that, and how have you come to work that out?
I think you've touched on really the hardest component of sitting in that position, honestly, because you wear so many hats in that building. You know, you represent your area, and I feel like that is my ultimate responsibility, is that I represent this district. And yet, in this district, you have politically Democrats and Republicans and independents, and you're never going to all agree on the same solution. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, if you hear from a huge number of people on one side, does that make it the right decision? Or, because I've also found in this process that it seems like 5% of the population makes 95% of the noise, and that there is a core group that watch things quietly. And so to me, I have to balance that and think about that on any bill I put my name on any bill I vote for. I will tell you this, I did not once feel pressure from the party. I never felt like somebody was forcing me to do something that didn't fit my beliefs. And they actually, on some issues that are very polarizing, right to life, for one, mm-hmm. they've made it completely clear, this is something we cannot steer you on. This is something that you will vote on with your heart. This is something that you have run a campaign and been elected on a stance, and be true to yourself. So that I felt was very encouraging when I got over there. So it is a responsibility, though, that weighed on me, that I felt. There were nights where, I sat up at night and I couldn't sleep, or I thought about a vote, and did I, am I going to do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Which side do you take? And yet it's a level of stress that I felt comfortable in handling.
The committees that you got assigned to, where did you end up? And you are assigned your committee. You get to choose. You get to put in your wants, as it were.
Sure.
No guarantee you're going to get them, though, right?
Exactly. So on organization day, I sat down with a piece of paper and I wrote my top 3 choices for committees. And that information goes to the State House leadership, and then over the course of a couple weeks they make decisions and they do committee assignments. And my top 3 choices for committees were Healthcare Committee, Ways and Means, which runs the budget, and Agriculture and Rural Development. When I got my committee assignments...
Did you expect to get Ways and Means?
I did not. I did not realize the significance of that at the time. But to me, that was a huge moment for me, because I felt like that is the heart and soul of the General Assembly, that everything that has a fiscal component runs through Ways and Means. So I almost looked at that as a window to the rest of what was going on in the State House. That something could come through Judicial Committee or through a local government committee, or anything that had, whatever this fiscal trigger was, would then come to our committee. And so I felt like, and the schedule was terrible. I mean, we met in the early parts every day. Every department of government would come and present their budget to us, and so it was an incredibly busy committee, but still the window to everything that went on in that building. So I felt blessed with that assignment. I absolutely loved that committee appointment. And then, healthcare, I think, made great sense. There was a core group of people in this state that are involved in healthcare decisions, but this year we added 2 physicians. Dr. Fleming is Democrat from Southern Indiana, and then myself. We joined Doc Brown, who was a retired ER doc, and oral surgeons, some others with healthcare experience, administrators and pharmacists and respiratory therapists. So that one was kind of understood that it was going to happen. And then I was just felt very lucky to get Agriculture and Rural Development, because I think get on Google Maps and look at Wayne County, and you don't think agriculture and rural development play a huge role on what happens in this district on a day-to-day basis. So I was very, very happy with my assignments.
I guess you were 3 for 3.
I was.
There wasn't a reason to complain.
No, and again, I don't know. I mean, I made the joke all session that I was the world's oldest freshman. Here I was in there, and there are 28-year-olds and 32-year-olds, and a variety, others about my age that had been in county or local government and then made the step. But I felt like, boy, I was very unique in my age, what I brought, my life experience, what I brought to the picture. So,
what did you learn in your first year? What surprised you? I guess I'll ask it that way. What surprised you in your first year?
How long's the program? I don't know how much. Everything surprised me. Everything. For one thing, I will say, we have a functional state government. Now, that being said, I was a member of a supermajority. So, I think 67 to 33 was the breakdown in the House, and to be on the supermajority, it certainly puts you in. I have a different perspective, I'm sure, than somebody that came in as one of the 33 Democrats. But when we looked at the numbers at the end of the year, I think something like 80 to 85% of the legislation that goes through the state government does so with less than 5 dissenting votes. So like, for instance, there was just the opioid program up at Ivy Tech where the author of the book Dreamland, Sam Quinones, came into town, and we had a panel discussion. And I went back and looked up the opioid legislation for this last session, and I found that there were 15 bills that were enacted into law. And I went back and I looked at the 100 votes in the House and the 50 votes in the Senate on 15 bills, and to my surprise, out of those votes, there were 2 dissenting votes. Those bills passed with, I can't do the math quickly in my head, but about 2,000 to 2 was the vote count. Right. And I haven't looked up those votes. It was funny, there were a couple people on the other side that decided, hey, we can't let stuff go through here so squeaky clean. And there were a couple negative votes that I think happened just to show that we're in a two-party system. But something like that, where we've all agreed that it's an issue in this state, and we all go and can agree that this is good policy, almost unanimously. And so that, to me, was very, it was good feedback, that it's not like you see on TV in Washington where there's constantly two sides fighting. Now, there are issues.
Well, when it's 2-1,
well,
the other side doesn't have much incentive to fight.
Well, I would say that on certain issues that are polarizing, the vote would often be 65 to 35 or 68 to 32. Mm-hmm. And so to have something that almost unanimous,
sure,
it means something. And if 80 to 85% of the legislation that goes through has less than 5 dissenting votes, it's telling you that, wow, we're trying to work together. We're trying to be good sports. There are issues that are polarizing that the two sides will never agree on. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to that, I bet 95% of the issues are under the radar, and 5% are what you read about in the newspaper. So that was one thing, how well we can work together. And then another thing that caught me was that I could sit there for a committee hearing or a session or vote and listen to all of the information, and then the next day read an article in the paper that had a completely different spin on it. And I thought, wow, it's almost like was I in the same room, that there is an agenda that or a perspective that's being broadcast that's different than what I viewed as the reality of it. And so that was a little disenchanting to see that. Okay. So I think there are things that pleasantly surprised me, and there are things that disappointed me a little bit. But overall, I've been telling people when they ask me, 90% of the time, I love what I'm doing. I mean, I feel that there's a way to have positive impact for a district and a community.
You're watching In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with Brad Barrett, state representative for District 56. We're going to take a short break, come back, kind of wrap this up, talk a little bit about some legislation, summer study sessions, which always kind of swing into the fall. Another session is coming up, some expectations. We'll deal with all of that when we continue with In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11.
Hi, I'm Roxy Deer with the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce. Join me for Chamber Chat as we talk about all things buy local this month. First, we'll hear from Julie Frame from the Barn at Helm, as well as Eric Nicholson and Ed De La Paz talking about Small Business Saturday and the Buy Local Committee.
And then, shop all down Main Street in the Depot area.
Watch Chamber Chat Tuesday evenings, 8 p.m. on Channel 20 WETV.
Hi, I'm Eric. host of Eastern Indiana Works. I hope you'll join me on the next episode when we speak with Bree Steffen, HR Manager for Tyson Foods. We'll also speak with Fred Payne, Commissioner of the Indiana Department of Workforce Development, and Valerie Schaefer, President of the Wayne County EDC.
We try to work closely with our partners at Work One, Eastern Indiana Works, Ivy Tech Community.
Eastern Indiana Works, Tuesday nights at 10:30 on WETV, Channel 20.
It's another sibling rivalry volleyball match as the IU East Red Wolves host the Grenadiers of IU Southeast in a River States Conference matchup Saturday afternoon in the IU East Student Events and Activities Center. It's Junior Red Wolves Day, and Junior Red Wolves who get in free to all regular season home games can get one adult in free. If you can't make it to the gym, catch the match live beginning at 11:55 on Wayne County's Education Access Station and TV home of the Red Wolves, WETV, Channel 20.
Hi, I'm Sherry Harlan, program host for Read Beside You. Join us on our next episode when we'll meet the Read Hospitalist program, and our guest will be Sherry Frame, nurse practitioner, and Dr. Sinead Million. Join us Thursday, Channel 20 at 8 o'clock on WETV.
Welcome back to In Focus on WGTV Channel 11. We're spending some time with State Representative Brad Barrett, who is finishing up, I guess, almost halfway through the first term, sitting out this election season, but another one rolls around again sooner than you think. Are you looking forward more to the next campaign than you did to the first one? The first one I know was so much of a learning experience for you, so incredibly new. From the way you're talking, you're enjoying what you're doing, you're feeling like you're going to make a difference. The assumption is you're going to run again. Are you starting to work that through your head a little bit at all?
I am, and I think I'm just approaching that point where I'll be repeating things. You know, like this organization day will be my second organization day. Mm-hmm. And so there's always comfort in when you're back on familiar territory. I cannot say that I look forward to campaigning. I think it was very stressful the first time, running against an incumbent, being in a completely different environment than I was used to, not knowing how to do these little sessions, these in focus sessions, not feeling completely comfortable at a podium, and yet I believed in my. I believed in the product. I believed that I was doing this for what I thought was the right reason, and so I was comfortable with that part. And I think I'll be more comfortable going into another cycle. I feel that the learning curve is so steep that I don't think it's fair to anybody to bow out after one cycle. I feel committed to the process, and I just feel like with time I can just build on the foundation that I've created last year and really try to be more effective as a legislator.
Talk about that a little bit. When you say effective as a legislator, have you reached the point where you've really started to go, okay, if I learn X, Y, Z, or if I do X, Y, Z, or if I meet enough people, I can really make an impact here, here, and here? Are there 2 or 3 things that in your mind you're starting to think, I think there's a better way, I think government has a place to do this, and I think there may be a better way than what we're doing it, and I want to try to move the ball forward on 2 or 3 issues?
Well, so in terms of the system, I mean, it's been in place for a long time, and I think I would be mistaken in thinking that I can go over there and change the system. But I feel like I can make a difference how I decide to pursue it. You know, at one of these community meetings, somebody talked about how politicians sometimes aren't truthful or are using something for their own gain, pass legislation to help their own business or whatever. And
People talk about politics and they say dirty quite often
yeah,
when they
exactly.
talk about that.
And I said, I can't change that in everybody, but I can tell you that it starts here. If I can try to live to my own ethical standard, then it's got to start somewhere. But like I told you earlier, I was just very encouraged at how I thought functionally things ran at the state level. Now, in terms of policy, I think from a healthcare standpoint, I bring a different perspective, having been submerged in that for 30 years. So I think there's a huge opportunity from a healthcare standpoint to make an impact.
Okay.
So I look very much forward to the second session where, hopefully I've networked and developed some credibility where we can see if we can make a difference.
Let's talk about one issue real quick, the issue of vaping, how it's come out. It's being touted as a serious health problem, almost depending on who you talk to and what news organization you're watching, an epidemic. There's been discussions that the state legislature is talking about, thinking about doing some things. Your perspective on that?
Well, I mean, it's so complex. We talked about how do you make decisions at the State House. I look at that from strictly a healthcare standpoint, and it's not a healthy thing. People think that this mist is water vapor, and it's not. There's chemicals in that. There are cartridges you can buy out on the market that are aftermarket products where people in their basements are adding materials to some of these cartridges, and so you don't always know what you're going to get, and so it is not a healthy process. It's another nicotine delivery system. We know from a healthcare standpoint that there are drawbacks to that and negative health consequences, and yet aren't we in a society where people can make their own decisions? And so how do we regulate the business of selling these products and people that want still to have their own independent decision making? A lot of this I look at as education. Can you educate people? Can you take opportunity to let people know that what they're inhaling into their lungs isn't just steam and water vapor, that there's a danger associated with that. And then taxing. We talked about taxing vaping products last time, and it didn't gain momentum. And yet, from a health standpoint, it makes great sense. From the standpoint of, are we throwing another burden on Indiana residents by taxing this? Should we tax alcohol more, or tobacco more, or chewing tobacco or snuff, or should we tax sugary products, or where do you draw the line? And that's where I really feel like a rookie, that I've got to decide on these issues what carries the most weight: the health aspect, the taxing aspect. Does taxing just discourage use, or does it raise money to pay for the complications that we see as a state? So I don't have the answer for that. I will agree with you that I would like to see less vaping in this state. I would like to see it appeal less to our teenagers. I had 2 kids that were exposed to vaping in high school, and I wasn't happy about that. I know it happens, and some of this is personal responsibility, where I feel like, gosh, I've got to make sure that people around me understand the harms of that. I think vaping was developed as a nicotine delivery system that has its complications, but it's safer than tobacco smoke. So a lot of these things are a relative risk.
Talked about kids, talked about youth. We are concerned as a society about the low numbers of voters that we have in some instances. Talk about any time that you've spent with youth during this past year trying to inform them about the political system that you're learning about, what's going on. And we talked real briefly at the beginning about an internship program that you said is a very good program. Take a couple of minutes and spend some time talking about the youth.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great opportunity, and I've always felt comfortable in that role. As a physician, I constantly had pre-med students, med students, residents that we mentored and taught, and I really enjoyed that part of it. I mean, the idea that you have a certain opportunity and a certain level of expertise, and to share that with the next generation, I think is critical. In the community, I've had several teachers invite me into their classrooms, and I've spent time talking to kids about the system, how important it is to vote. At the State House, we've had classrooms come over. We've had groups of students come over. I've made that offer, and I'll make it here to the TV land. I love it when people from this community come over to the State House. We have a page program where high school students can sign up for this. They get a tour of the State House. We meet them and do pictures in front of the General Assembly. We have them sit in and listen on a session, and hopefully spur that duty and that responsibility to vote and to be involved. This internship program, you asked about my staff earlier. I typically have a legislative assistant who's a college graduate interested in either law or public policy, and then we'll have an intern that maybe is not sure where they're going, and we bring them into the State House for the session, whether it's 3 or 4 months, and they help us with our emails, help with constituent issues, help us research policy, and kind of take them under our wing and expose them to how this system works. It was a great program.
How have you found your constituents' ability to navigate the system, to get to you, to get to the State House, to understand what's going on, and are there ways to make that system easier for people to understand so that they can engage better?
There's roadblocks all along the way, I found, and people don't know that the State House is their State House, and that you can get online and watch the session live, much like your programs. You can go to the State House and stand in the atrium and watch through a glass window and hear on speaker everything that's happening. All of our committee meetings are transparent and are broadcast, and people don't realize that. You can come over, meet with your representative or your senator, if the schedule allows, sit in the session and see how things operate over there. And so I'm trying to break down some of those barriers. The email system, I mean, we'll get flooded with emails. There's filters. Not everything gets through. A legislative assistant may not see the significance of something that I see. They may not recognize a name that I recognize from the community and filter it and put it in a file. And it may be 2 months later that something comes up and we're like, wow, there's something that was important that didn't get our attention. And I think it's just part of the whole volume thing. So I'm trying to be more aware of that. I'd love to run an open invitation to people that want to come over and see how the system works. And I think because then when you engage in something, you're more likely to participate in it.
We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to talk about what you've been doing this summer. The State House goes through what are called summer study sessions. Summer and fall is what they swing into. What have you been working on? What sessions have you been sitting in? What have you been learning?
My main assignment for the summer and the fall was Medicaid. That because of my input on Ways and Means and the healthcare committees, that it seemed like that was the perfect window for me to get involved in. As a physician, I dealt with Medicaid as a provider for 15 years and saw how exactly that system worked and the loopholes and the intricacies and the roadblocks to that system. And now I'm getting the perspective as a legislator from the state's perspective on how does that system work. And the challenge then is how can we use that system, minimize waste, and maximally improve the health care of our community. So that was one of the tasks I was given. And then the other thing that's really kind of come up passively is just talk about healthcare costs in the state, and how we're seeing the impact that it has on the individual and then on the employer. Where with cost shifting, it seems like the employed seem to bear more of the burden for paying for health care, the uninsured, the decreased reimbursements that we see from Medicare or Medicaid, Medicare, and HIP 2.0. So that's another issue that's gotten a lot of attention this summer.
The committees that you were on last year, there were 3 that you mentioned. Do those carry over into the next year, or when you get to organization day, do you have to kind of fill out that little slip and ask for 3 new ones?
We had a meeting a week ago in Indianapolis with the leadership of the caucus, the 8 or 10 most experienced members, and they said, for the most part, those committees would stay the same, that they want continuity in those. You invest so much time to learn a subject matter, what issues are important in that. And a lot of the decisions we make are all really concentrate on healthcare, and then I'll gain your trust, and that I can then steer you on healthcare issues, because I can't know 100% of everything. And so a lot of our systems build around the committee process, vetting an issue, presenting it then, and then you have trust in that they've researched this and vetted it appropriately.
I get your emails. Nice picture, huh? That comes out, it almost seems like weekly. Talking about some of the initiatives, some of the things that are happening, incentivizing data systems to data centers to locate in Indiana was one of them. And you just mentioned the dilemma. Do we tax, don't we tax? Do we incentivize or don't we incentivize? I know one of the problems that's talked about here in Indiana, particularly over here in East Central Indiana, and you hear it, workforce development. We don't have enough people necessarily to fill the jobs that we already have. Should more money in your mind be going into workforce development as opposed to incentivizing more businesses to come? And at what point have you thought about we're over-incentivizing? We keep saying to our residents sometimes, you can't have this, you can't have this, there's not enough money. But we're always willing to give up something for business. And I understand workers have to have businesses to go to, business has to have workers. You're fighting with that balance. I just kind of want to hear how you're fighting with that balance.
No, it's balance. And it's trying to find that right balance, to be fiscally responsible, to we have a state that doesn't have debt. We're in a state that has excellent credit rating and bond rating. We're a state that has a reserve built up. It seems like an astronomical number, but I think it would disappear in 45 days. But we have this reserve, and so there's this responsibility to balance all of these programs, which are great programs, and yet there's 100 demands on that dollar. And the data center, the appeal of that to me was that, wow, this is a center that brings it brings business into a community, it brings hardware and upkeep, and yet it's not heavy on the employee side. There's not a lot of employees that work in a data center. There's a lot of servers and information being processed to and fro. So it almost like it fits a gap as a business that's not real heavy on the employee side, but still brings business and dollars into the state. And we're competing against 50 other states for some of these things.
We are about 4 minutes. Want to see if you have any parting shots that you want to throw out there to your constituents, just to let them know something.
Well, I really am grateful for the opportunity to do this, and I'm trying to do it responsibly. I'm busy about every day. My wife and I were sitting and looking at the calendar, and it's not uncommon that I double book. I try to do so, like today, for instance. I told you I had something that I could have gone to in Muncie, but I felt like something in the district takes precedence every time. That's the number one priority, and so I appreciate the opportunity. I have loved this. I am trying to do it right. I am trying to take the time to learn things. it's been a great experience, a great opportunity.
I appreciate the time. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you
Thank
agreeing
you.
to come do this, seriously. Brad Barrett, State Representative, District 56. Reach out to him. I'm sure that he will talk to you. Remember voting. We do want to push that as hard as we can. It is still time to vote, 301 East Main Street, Monday, 8:30 to 5, Tuesday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, Saturday, October 26th, and November 2nd, 9 to 4 at the Coleman Center. Votes, the early voting, Coleman Center, First English Lutheran Church, takes place 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then again, you see those 2 Saturdays where the Coleman Center will be open. And then on Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., Coleman Center, Mount Olive Baptist Church, First English Lutheran Church, First Baptist Church, and the Golay Center. Remember, if you're in Western Wayne County on Election Day and you want to vote, you can do that at the Golay Center, even if you're a Richmond resident. If you are a Dublin or Milton resident and you're in Richmond on Election Day, you can vote here in Richmond at any of those vote centers. But also, please remember, a straight party ticket does not cover the at-large candidates. If you vote straight party, it does not cover the at-large candidates. You do have to go in and vote for those candidates individually. And then again, a reminder that along with our partners, the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce and Hometown Media Group, we will be here on Tuesday, November 5th, beginning at 6 p.m. Join us for our live election coverage, streaming on Facebook Live, as well as available on WGTV online. A couple of things to remind you of. Leaf collection is going on around the city. Pick up, please rake your pile, nothing bigger than 2 feet. In areas with no curves, rake to the very edge of the curb or the roadway. Actually, a lot of this information we will find out next week, as we will have a chance to have a conversation with Bob Warner, Wayne County engineer, Greg Steens, Director of Public Works and Engineering for the City of Richmond, and T.O. Bozell, who's the Street Commissioner for the City of Richmond, will be our guests on next week's In Focus. We'll find out a little bit more about that and some other road work and bridge repair that will be coming up. How is that drive on I-70, by the way?
It's been rough.
Welcome to the club.
Right.
Calendar Girls is going on at the main stage, Richmond Civic Theater. GoRCT.org. Definitely want to remind you that the Veterans Resource Fair and Hiring event is going to be taking place on the 25th from 10 to 2 at the Tom Raper Center for free health screenings, governmental resources, mental health services, and a whole lot more. Depot District Trick or Treat happens Wednesday, October 30th from 5 until 7. Take the kids. Have yourself a whole lot of fun. And if you don't know when trick-or-treating is for your community, I think we have most of them, not all, but it's up and definitely ready to do that. And last but not least, it's Red Kettle season. The Salvation Army is taking applications for folks who want to be volunteer bell ringers. You can actually do that online, registertoring.com, and that information is there on the screen. Thank you very much for spending time with us on this edition of In Focus on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. I wish you well. Have a great weekend.